Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this special meeting of Fernie City Council held at 6:30 p.m. on February 12th, 2025. Another of our budget meetings. I'm sure our Director of Finance will pointedly remind me which number in the sequence we are. Giisuqukit. We acknowledge that the city of Fernie is located with Kukinamakis, the unceded territory of the Yakutat Nucleat First Nation. We recognize that we live and work within their vast lands. Akanahunik are from Yakutat Nucleat and are members of the Ktunaxa-speaking peoples of British Columbia, Idaho, and Montana. I'll call the meeting to order and ask for a mover and a seconder of the following recommendations that the agenda of the February 12th, 2025 special council meeting be adopted. Moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor Audia Kelly. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. I'll now open the floor to public participation and invite the public in attendance or participating electronically who wish to comment on items listed on the meeting agenda in accordance with sections 3.7.3 of the procedure bylaw to address council, except speakers must not address council regarding a matter for which a public hearing must be held or has been held pursuant to the Local Government Act prior to council's consideration of the matter or adoption of the bylaw. Speakers must not address council regarding a permit for which public notice must be given or has been given pursuant to the Local Government Act prior to council's consideration of issuance of the permit. Any speaker may only address council for a maximum of 3 minutes. And as we have no one in the gallery, I'll turn to our manager of communication and see if anybody's online. Also no. That brings us immediately, thank you, Ms. Rhodes. That brings us immediately to item 5.1. 2025-2029 financial plan budget drill down meeting. A report from our Director of Finance.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. Good evening, Council. You spoiled my opening joke, so I won't make it.
I'm sorry.
But I think it's the 7th meeting now. It's actually a fairly short presentation from staff tonight, only about 15 slides with the items identified to have a bit of a closer look at from the last few budget meetings. And here's our budget schedule. We're at the orange arrow there, February 12th. The next budget meeting is next Wednesday, the 19th, which is the public open house, which will be here at the Senior Center at 6:30. Just a quick note here, reminding Council of process. Tonight's meeting is meant still to be an information session. Staff are not seeking direction on a specific resolution on adopting a financial plan tonight, though Council can certainly provide any direction they wish on the items that form tonight's presentation. Staff will be seeking specific direction on a tax increase and financial plan bylaw on the 25th of February. And while time is not unlimited with this budget process, should we arrive at February 25th and Council decides they're not ready to provide direction or would like more information still, there is a little bit of room to delay by scheduling 1 or 2 additional special meetings on top of our regular committee of the whole meetings. Because after the 25th, it's really just readings of the budget bylaw and then more readings of the separate tax rate bylaw that follows the budget. So there's a little bit of wiggle room there should we need it. But obviously, the later we adopt, the later our departments can get started planning their work plan for the summer and scheduling their capital projects.
Sorry, Director. Councillor Ramadas.
Thanks, Your Worship. Maybe it's just a Council 101 question from myself. How does from reading 1 to reading 2 to reading 3, like, what's the purpose of that? Like, I understand what the purpose is in my mind, but I want to hear it from someone who's a better expert on this than I am.
Mr. Bornowski.
Thank you. As it's a bylaw, it's to allow for public notice that the bylaw will be read, and then for sober second thought in between the readings of the bylaws. It just allows for contemplation and a clear mind for each reading of the bylaw as we proceed through those steps and then towards adoption. And you'll know from when we do different types of bylaws, there are different types of notice requirements or different types of timing requirements and considerations, including up to public hearings. What's unique with the budget process is we do have to present the budget. It has to be presented for public comment as part of the process. So,
thank you, Mr. Bornowski. Can I ask, sorry, if between to your point about sober second thought, if between the first and second reading, there's a considerable change, is that now the first reading of a revised budget, or is it we then move into the second reading of a revised budget?
I think between first and second reading, you could make amendments and then continue on in the process. It's once you get to a third reading, you're going to want to stop receiving new information and either advance that bylaw or rescind readings, do modifications, and then proceed again.
Thank you.
Is my understanding. I'd like to confer after the meeting a bit more with Lavinia. We can review the legislation a little more carefully than just off the top of our heads.
No, I appreciate that though. Thank you. That's a good question. Thank you. Please proceed, Mr. Burnett.
Thank you. But as of now, adoption for this budget bylaw is scheduled for March 25th.
February 25th? March 25th?
Adoption, March 25th.
Ah, thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Direction, February 25th.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. And then this evening, council was given an updated binder, which I will call V2. And as part of that is a Word document outlining all of the changes made from the original binder, which I'm calling V1. But I wanted to just highlight the major changes here now. Property insurance increased from V1 by $63,000. The reason for this is that before January 30th, which was the day we had our operating budget presentation, we had confirmation of new insurance that was bound at a much cheaper rate with a new provider. The afternoon of the 31st, however, the new provider pulled back and said they needed more time to find proper coverage on their end. Unfortunately, our property insurance expires on January 31st, and so we were left with no option but to extend with our current provider, which is more expensive. It's very frustrating, but the positive is that both providers now are very aware that we're looking for more affordable rates, and I'm hopeful one of them can come through for us in the end. Second point, I re-performed a little more in-depth math on the timing of expected increases due to the ongoing negotiations with our unions. And because we're already in mid-February and there's been a little bit of favorable news around the inflationary environment, interest rate announcements and whatnot, I felt it warranted a slight decrease in our estimate. It is still just an estimate, however. And later this year, when the actuals start to roll in, if what's in our budget is too out to lunch, staff will have to bring that back to council and have a look at further utilizing our financial stability operating reserve, which was created specifically for things like this.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. With regards to the revenue, or sorry, the decrease in expenses due to the lower interest rates, what is it a direct correlation to a reduced impact on our revenues, interest revenues on our investments, or are our investments kind of fixed for the time being and we'll see that change in future years?
That's a good question, Councillor Hamilton, and I appreciate asking for clarity. It's more just being optimistic that the current economic trends will enable a slightly favorable negotiation for us and financially is the idea there. Mayor Milligan brought this up last night, but the local government housing initiative grant of around $177,000 was not listed as a funding source for planning projects. We actually caught this last week, and while most of the grant is for capital projects, there was a portion of the grant meant to fund the additional 0.5 FTE planning position, which we've talked about before in these meetings. And so catching that actually increased our operating revenue by $60,000. And then there's a bunch of other smaller changes detailed on your worksheet that don't affect the tax rate. And then based on some discussion last night, I grabbed last 3 years actuals and populated an estimate for capital expenditures for years 3 to 5 of the capital plan. Mostly in facilities, but there were some water and sewer numbers that I plunked in there as well. And so to, again, Mayor Milligan's point last night, confidence would be fairly low that it will turn out to be 100% accurate. But then to Councillor McIsaac's point, it'll be better than zero. And then so overall effects from V1 to V2 is a reduction in our shortfall by just under 73,000, which reduces our tax increase to 5.98%. And I'll remind council and the public now that our shortfall related purely to the 2025 operating budget is really only 2.83%, which is actually less than CPI. The other 3.15% is related to the deferred tax increase from 2024 from using that the remainder of the COVID restart grant. I wanted to make a point about these changes. They're actually a good thing because the better the more time we have to work through this process and the more efficient I get and the team get, we have more time to look at these things and really make sure the numbers are dialed down. So maybe, while it's it could be viewed as frustrating that they're changing all the time, I think it's actually a good thing that we keep having eyes on this data. So.
Well, I would agree. They're certainly changing in the right direction. Councillor Adia Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. CFO, the 150,000 adjustment to the financial stability operating reserve, can you just remind me of why that was?
What page are you on, Councillor?
25. The little tiny that, anyone want to borrow this? It says ending balance 2024. It's about 395.
Yep.
And then we're adding like about almost 151 back.
Yep. So you will see that for most of the reserve funds. And the reason for that are for projects that have been not yet completed and paid for. So we carry forward, put the money back into reserves and then take it back out for those carry forward projects. Or sometimes projects are just canceled altogether. And so I'll put it back into the reserve just to update the balances. So for that specific reserve, there was an amount in there last year for mostly the contractual increases from our union negotiations, which didn't happen in 2024. So that amount's put back into that reserve and then being used again for the same thing this year.
Excellent. Thank you.
And then Mr. Bornowski is going to take the microphone for a few slides here.
Thank you, Brendan. I just wanted to provide a couple context setting comments before we look into some of the drill down and potential cost saving measures. Having worked with staff over the past week on this, it really hit home the fact that we initiated the budget process with a lot of what you're describing as finding less impactful cost cutting measures, which is what we did through October and November and December to kick into this. And so I just really wanted to highlight that each director did and annually does a line by line review of their entire budgets. And in fact, now at our month end, each director is doing a line by line review of their budgets with finance at the end of each month. And they're reviewing each amount and limiting increases wherever possible. We work to ensure that the funds that we budget support sustainable operations. So we don't want to have not enough budget to continue those operations through the end of the year. And our goal is also, if we have some light mid-year pivots in service areas, we don't want those impacting budgets and to have to come back and ask for additional budget increases mid-year that negatively impact the plan that you're adopting now. And another way we do this is just by really working hard to estimate realistic non-taxation revenues. So by not overestimating what we think we might make in our revenues, whether that's rentals or permits or otherwise. And so as we worked through this over the last couple of weeks, it's really tricky to find large buckets of cost savings that are meaningful in terms of reducing a tax increase or an operating budget that don't have very real and significant impacts on service delivery. We have over the past number of years really tightened the budget to a point where it supports the basic sustainability of our operations. I have just a few slides from a very top level as the administrator. One, admin overtime. Overtime is something I always look at because I'm not a fan of structured overtime or budgeted overtime as a way of doing regular business. Over the past number of years, we have had a focus on reducing our admin overtime. So this isn't your dedicated on-the-ground service delivery OT. This is all of your exempt staff from myself through directors, through managers across the organization. It peaked in 2023 at about $103,000. Before that, it was at about 89 or 90. In 24, we were able to, through a couple really deliberate actions, bring that down, and we continue now looking ahead to 2025 to budget that lower at 69,000. So looking to take about 30% off of that peak high to where we are today. Looking at that, administration and finance is the largest at $40,000. If I back that out, that majority of that really is council and committee meetings and open houses, and then some extra municipal body meetings or working with organizations outside the municipality. And we have periodic deadline-driven overtime. We're coming into year end, we're coming into a deadline on a major project, we're meeting with consultants who need to meet in the evening, or we wind up working on a Friday to get something published because it has to be out for council. That happens on occasion. The reason I share that is it was one of the first places I looked to see if we could reduce what we're budgeting. Thank you. You do have some options as council. You could direct a freeze or a significant reduction in the admin overtime. It would require that we adjust daytime schedules for the admin staff around council meetings, and that's something we've already started doing, but don't do hour for hour. Reason being, you lose daytime availability of the exempt staff who are here supporting council or doing work in the evenings with the community when that needs to happen. So I would anticipate you'd have some delay in the delivery of stuff like reports and plans and analysis, working through reviews of submissions for RFPs or consulting reports that do always seem to come in on a Friday when you need to get them turned around and published on an agenda. The other option is a shift of council or committee meetings to daytime hours. It would eliminate the evening overtime. Again, there are challenges for council to attend. Reduced availability for the senior staff during those meetings, although you might have improved ability to gather information rapidly while you're meeting, but it really shifts the opportunity of who can and who may attend. And I don't want to undervalue that and the importance of that and the importance of council being able to attend, because not everybody has free time in their schedules. But those are, I think, your real levers to pull in terms of reducing that administrative overtime budget with real implications. Thank you.
Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Worship. Hypothetical question. If we were to move to rolling up all of our committee of the wholes into regular meetings as like a part and parcel, such as we've done occasionally, so moving to 2 meetings a month, but they would be a regular meeting and a committee of the whole meeting together, would that actually represent a 1/3 savings per month in that? Or is that overly simplistic?
Through to council, I think it's a little overly simplistic. Your meetings cost $2,000 to $2,500 per meeting if they're short, reasonably efficient, effective meetings. In terms of having room bookings, technology, 6 exempt staff generally attend for 3 hours to set up, have the meeting, go away, that kind of thing. So if you start combining them, as some municipalities do, they'll hold a regular meeting, a committee of the whole, they'll have a recess, they may have in camera, and then they'll have another regular meeting to wrap up business arising from committee sometimes. You could probably reduce the frequency, but I'd anticipate they'd be a bit longer. So maybe you could reduce them by a quarter. Yeah, but
Yeah,
it's a change in service.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Bornowski, I just reflecting on last night's meeting where we had a fairly hefty embedded committee of the whole, and it was a long meeting, and yeah, so I think I understand the question, but I think the savings would be negligible overall. Councillor Ramanathan?
Your Worship, at the end of the day, the ground to cover will be the same. You do it in 4 meetings or 2 meetings, you will still have the same
Yeah.
amount of business to cover. So I think it'll end up being a longer meeting.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's true.
Thank you. In the communities where I see it done effectively, they'll have a committee meeting in the afternoon. They'll break and maybe have in camera if there's confidential material, have a dinner break, and then convene for public.
Yeah.
And that way the public can attend and see decisions being made and participate if there are public hearings, but committee can have committee in a different, so it gives you a longer day, but it doesn't work for everybody, which is a very real constraint.
Yeah. Councillor Audie Kelly?
Thanks, Your Worship. CAO, do the staff work like a flex time schedule at all?
Yeah, we have a regular day off or an earned day off schedule. And so staff typically work 30 minutes extra per day for a 3-week and then have an earned day off every 3 weeks. And so as part of the overtime for council meetings, you can fill up that bank. And that should count towards your EDOs. And also as a matter of having a basic balance of life. As an example, we were here till 11 p.m. last night. We generally try to start a little bit later, the day of or the day after a meeting.
Further, your worship?
Yeah.
And is there a cap, like example, in my job, I'm not allowed to work more than 9 hours, even though I do.
No, we do
work
not
a
have
flex,
cap.
like system.
No.
Sorry, Counselor, help me understand that. More than 9 hours of overtime in a given week, or?
Sorry, your worship, I, like in my role, I can't work more than 9 hours in one day.
Okay.
And then my hours have to add up to the 2-week max to have that earned day off.
Right.
So I was just wondering if we had like a limit to how many hours a person could put in.
I suspect the only governing issue there, say in an emergency, looking at our fire chief, would be the 16-hour limit under WCB.
That's correct. And we have specific limits in our collective agreements for our union employees.
Right, of course. Yeah.
Thank you, Council.
Sorry, Counselor Ramirez?
Oh, I do.
Your worship, can I just go 2 slides behind
Mhm.
if you wouldn't mind? CFO, can I just one more? Sorry, another one. I'm good.
Thank you.
If I may?
Yeah.
Thank you. Apologies for the delay there. Finally, I looked at training, travel, and professional development. There have been some comments about costs related to this. Keep in mind, we're thinking at about 70 to 100 employees generally who have some form of entitlement to professional development and training. When we look at our total budgets, this year we're budgeting for just north of $147,000, $50,000 or $52,000 of that is dedicated to safety training and is something that I would consider non-optional as we work towards CORE. The training budgets have, however, been aligned. Thank you. Training budgets have, however, been aligned with policy, and were specifically developed in order to advance 2 key objectives out of Council's strategic plan, looking at the organization: A, employee satisfaction, and B, employee development. Council can look at some of this. The notes, if they so wish to reduce them, the notes I wanted to share is some training and travel is booked already and has begun already because it needs to be planned and courses need to be registered for well in advance. So we've worked out of year 2 budgets for that. And I do want to, again, just recognize there are some really cost-effective training efficiencies that we've advanced in the past couple of years. Proud of the in-house training that Fernie Fire and Emergency Services provides. We prioritize online courses, and I should recognize our directors who've completed their professional asset management certification in the last year. Our occupational health and safety manager is completing further credentialing, both in terms of contract management and occupational health and safety as well online. And just celebrate that today started the first offering in many, many years of public administration diploma classes offered through Capilano University, which Fernie initiated the advocacy for out of Cranbrook, so that we can send many more people for that kind of training rather than flying a person down to Vancouver or to Kelowna and paying that flight and travel and time and course registration. And I'm happy to have worked over the past year with all the CAOs, with the CAOs of our region to make that happen, and it's oversubscribed. So we've got a really healthy appetite for that. It's a good way to build professional networks here.
Councilor Ramirez?
Thanks, Your Worship. CIO, I love this slide. It's super transparent, great work there on this particular slide. The only thing that I wanted to ask is, despite all those improvements that you just mentioned, why don't I see the numbers go down? Why is it going up?
Yeah. tuition for some courses is more expensive. And previously, we hadn't budgeted for complete tuition for a course. So previously, we budgeted an amount and increased it by a percentage year over year to reflect inflation. But you would look at taking a course through CAPU or the LGMA towards your administration certificate, your public administration certificate or diploma, and we would only have funds for about 2/3 of that. And so we're recognizing our policy and the true cost of tuition now. That's part of it. And travel and overnight stays are expensive. They remain really costly. You know, we found again that hotel rooms for the big conferences and just registration fees for the big conferences are more and more. It's a challenge when you look at a UBCM or LGMA conference, and they're expensive.
Councillor Adia Kelly?
Thanks, Your Worship. CAO, do we have limits to the amount of courses and amount of hours that staff can take outside of like safety related stuff that we all like has to happen?
Yeah, through to council, we have a specific amount that staff are eligible in terms of funding up to. And for the exempt staff, we do the development plan each year and plot out what courses or what specific training they should be going after, but we limit it. It's not a, it's not a bottomless pit. It's capped, and capped specifically by band. So a coordinator or a manager or a director or the CAO have bands.
Further?
Yeah, if you don't mind. So for courses like say in Cranbrook, are the city vehicles then utilized so that there's not, especially now that we have electric vehicles, seems environmentally and financially sound that the staff could take advantage of taking them?
Yes, through to council, I just met our administrative clerk from Parks, Facilities and Recreation coming back from their first day in the first course in Cranbrook just before council started. We do support travel with city vehicles wherever we can.
Councillor Nixon?
Thank you, Your Worship. I love this slide. I love continuing education, and I want to thank you guys for all the staff for going above it. It's a commitment, and it takes you away from your families, and it makes Fernie a better place. So thank you very much.
Mr. Bronowski, please don't misunderstand this question, because I think I know the answer based on your further how you've sort of elucidated how the professional development worked. But when your opening comment was there are X number of employees with entitlement to professional development, so that we have built that into their development plan individually. Is that what you meant by that?
Thank you for the question. What I meant by that is we created updated the education and training policy to reflect, to better reflect the actual cost of tuition and the reality of taking the courses that one generally takes in public administration, and then created thresholds at different levels that people are allowed to be reimbursed when they successfully complete courses or have courses paid for. And so, what I was saying is it's not specifically enshrined in collective agreements or in individual contracts, but each year working with their supervisors, employees talk about what professional development and development goals they have, and then courses are selected and identified, or a priority to select a course in a specific area is identified, and then they go out and do that within their limit.
Yeah, and I just to this slide, which I also appreciate, it serves us in terms of employee satisfaction. So there's a retention piece, but there's also a development piece in terms of succession planning, and as people will move on the conveyor of employment, they're better prepared for their next role.
I firmly believe that, and not to pick anyone out of this meeting, but you have a number of staff right now who are taking online professional development through either the LGMA or Capilano University or UVic or others. And it connects them not only with education and training, but with a network of mentors and peers, because those classes are taught by professionals in their fields. And so it's invaluable. And that's generally the feedback I receive from employees who go through that stuff.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton?
Thank you. Following that kind of bouncing ball of thought of staff retention and recruitment, do we have any sort of data or cost estimates on what it costs to onboard a new senior staff member? Both in terms of, just straight training time to get up to speed with our systems, but also costs for delays in projects or delays in impacts to service delivery, anything like that. Like, is that a number that has ever been looked at to quantify?
Not in recent memory, not that I would consider accurate. We probably have some back of the napkin math, but nothing that I think I would bring out.
Councillor Ramanus.
Thanks, Your Worship. CAO, just for our understanding here, can you give me like 2 or 3 examples of these trainings that are not safety related, that's contributing to the majority of this $97,000 here?
One example would be, because I'm a designated accountant, I have to do 40 hours of continuing education every year. Otherwise, I lose my designation. So that's one example, and that's built in to my contract as well.
Planners, engineering, the same. They have CEUs that have to be completed each year. The majority that I look at specifically are generally within the Public Administration Diploma Program, who offer a certificate, an advanced certificate, or a leadership certificate in local government. Courses include everything from 200, which is currently being offered, and we've looked at all of our Municipal 2 clerks who are generally new to local government, although they're skilled professionals, and are sending them through that program as an introduction to the legislation that guides us. How does the local government operate? What are bylaws? All of that fundamental training. That's what's currently being offered in Cranbrook. Other courses include a introduction into planning for non-planners through a MATI program that we would send anybody involved in development services, whether that's an engineer or a GIS technician or a planning technician. It's a crash course in planning, community planning, land use, zoning, all of that. Really useful for someone moving into that field, which can be a bit esoteric. And then policy and bylaw development, financial planning for local government, communication and consultation. Those are generally specific, sector-specific courses. That's really the meat and potatoes of what I try to encourage and what we look at for training, rather than, say, general computer literacy or specific education and training that one might go and get at a broader university or in a general program.
Councillor Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. Again, no offense is meant by this question. I'm in my work realm. In order for me to take training, I also have to have a satisfactory work performance, and I have to have a written professional plan. So do we do the same thing?
We have a written development plan with goals for all the exempt members who go and take that training. For our unionized members, it is new that we are getting them introduced into this. So we, managers and supervisors, have goal setting and discussion topics, and then we work with them to register them in the courses that work for them. We don't have specific language in the collective agreement. I believe that the GEU and other unions working with the province do have specific language around and specific policy already developed around how do I get to access it. We do have policy around, are you passing? Are you going to be funded for this if you do not complete that course? At what point do you reimburse? And if you leave after taking all of this professional development, how much of that needs to be returned to the city?
Further?
Thanks. Just out of curiosity, are there any scholarships for city employees too? Like we have a scholarship program with the province that we can apply to, which is really nice.
It's a really good question. There are 2 through the Provincial Board of Examiners who actually award the certificates in local government administration, in addition to the university or college certificates you get for your continuing education, for your credit hours. And there are 2 certificates we typically receive, 2 scholarships or bursaries, and we apply, generally everybody who's taking courses applies into those, and we receive 2 to 3 a year. So typically 2 or 3 of our employees are on scholarships every year into these courses.
Thank you, Mr. Bornowski. Anything further? Councillor Eminis?
Thanks, Your Worship. Maybe you said this, CIO. Sorry if I'm asking the same question again, like the union staff, how much training does it get?
If I can have a minute, I'll pull up our policy and I can give you some specifics on that if that's okay.
I will continue in the meantime.
Please.
Okay. So then, last night's meeting closed with a slide that had 5 items on it for this deep dive drill down session. The first one was the issue about the increased costs in patching, which Director Heisler's here to talk to you about in a little more detail.
Good evening, Council. Yeah, so in the operating budget, I wanted to make a note of increased patching costs. So I pulled some comparable data here. This is just a 50 millimeter overlay and a 50 millimeter cut and patch. The top line is the cut and patch. So with real world data, we see an increase from pre-COVID 2020 to post-COVID last year of 53 to 58%. So the message I was trying to get to council was, without matching these increases in that patching program, you're basically going to see, you know, a 55% volume reduction in patching. We do have the pavement condition assessment and an IICP coming out, which will also aid us in where we can direct our money. However, the pavement condition assessment did recommend some significant investment just to maintain our patching. So that's another note that unfortunately won't be ready for this round of budget, but for next round of budget. And in speaking with the Director of Parks and Facilities too, we identified a bit of a gap too with respect to facilities and parking lots. For example, this facility right here has a pretty significantly rough parking lot. However, we're not really like putting money aside to maintain the parking lots for facilities. So the patch that we would have to do just in this parking lot, I would estimate would eat up at least half of that $60,000. And then we'd be using, you know, the other 30 for the rest of town. So in the future, this will be a problem, and we have the data that's getting collected right now to like provide some guidance to council. But I wanted to get some real numbers up there that we had currently to present today.
Councillor Eminis?
Worship, this is my personal opinion only. We shouldn't be scrimping on this one. I think this is like, if it's $35,000 extra, is that what, like, sorry, Director, did I understand this right? That this would be a $35,000 that is not visible on the budget right now?
Through to council, yeah, that's correct. Like if we wanted to maintain the effective amount of patching that we have been doing pre-COVID to post-COVID, it would be roughly 35,000. The other point I'm trying to make with the pavement condition assessment is that we are looking, like we have a list of, let's say 500 lines that's saying 3rd Ave, 50 millimeter mill the edge, pave over top, and it's prioritized. So once we have the updated IICP, we can look at what's on the list in the next 10 years. And then we can go to the pavement condition assessment and start working through those projects, making sure we're not going to rip it up with the IICP programs coming down the pipe. But we just don't have that today for this budget cycle. It's all being revised right now.
Further?
Thanks, Your Worship. So if I understand this right, this is not a matter of us not doing this, it's just doing it at the right places. And you're just waiting for IICP to be completed to go and execute on this. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. And in the near future, if we want to maintain our pavement, like next year, we're going to be looking at some significant investment recommendations to council that will have impacts to operating budget and thus taxes.
Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Worship. I think that last statement is probably where my question is going already. As I understood the math, what's being explained is that with the increase of costs, if we add $35,000 to the budget, we will be at the same level of patching that we have been doing, which doesn't actually include patching this particular parking lot and a few others that haven't been being maintained. So the lack of maintenance that's going on in a few places would continue. Is that accurate?
Yeah, even add, I guess the best way to me to phrase this is if you add the $35,000 we're still not maintaining our pavement quality index numbers.
Councillor Nixon?
Thank you, worship. So what is the number?
I can answer by not answering. So the money we put into our pavement goes into, in my mind, 3 buckets. The general patching within the operating GL of streets, the annual streets program that we're actually like fixing the utilities and then rebuilding the road in alignment with the ATMP. And then the future project, which we haven't ever really done in this city, which is like recommended, targeted, prioritized milling and paving and stuff like that to be on top of it rather than waiting for failure and skim coating it and crossing our fingers, frankly.
Sorry, just so I understand, so if, for the purposes of this parking lot, for example, so we haven't, it's not in the plan, how would we then get this done? And I'm calling this one out specifically because this is the senior center and there's elderly people getting in and out of vehicles on rough ground. Like, where does that money come from? Is there money in reserve that could be used for that?
That was a big internal debate we had in the last few months about what constitutes a facility. So for this facility, is it just the envelope of the building or is it the parking lot? And we can apply that to the Vic, Max Turk, the courthouse. Are we putting money aside for those parking lots within the facility reserve? That's kind of where we're at. And that's one of the points we've been talking about in the $300,000 facility assessment. Should we be looking at big outside items like the water sewer line to those facilities and the pavement on those facilities? Which bucket does that live in?
Right. Councillor Shoesmith.
Thanks, Mayor Milligan. Seems to me if we're not, nobody is. And from a user standpoint, I mean, it's part of the experience of going there is falling down in the parking lot on the way. So, seems pretty straightforward to me. My question actually is, were we to increase pothole patching, which I think is probably something that'd be fairly popular and a good use of money. Where are we pulling those people from? What would they be doing if we didn't do that?
So for clarity, the $60,000 portion of the streets budget is for like a contractor to come in and do hot patching. And then the remainder of that budget, that portion is us to have our cold mix and use our machines to go out and patch ourselves. So I'm not talking about that at all in tonight's discussion. I'm talking about, you know, the contractor who can come in with proper equipment and do a little bit better job than us just patching one-off potholes.
Thanks for the clarity. I was misunderstanding. Thank you.
Councillor Ramirez?
I was just about to ask exactly the same that Councillor Shoesmith was asking.
Okay.
I believe this entire thing is part of the experience. So in my mind, they're all part of the facilities. If you're looking at the pavement, if you're looking at the envelope of the building, you should also look at the pavement is how I see it.
Well, I appreciate that perspective. And I feel like that's a question that needs answered in short order. What is it we're responsible for? Because we, amongst other things, we clear the snow from this parking lot, do we not? So we're maintaining the parking lot in winter. So why are we not maintaining it full stop?
Yeah, so if I kind of put that back to Councillor, which bucket do you feel that paving money should come from? The facility bucket or from the street bucket? That's kind of the debate we've been having internally. We could take $30,000 of that 60 and patch this parking lot, but then around town, we're going to be doing significantly less.
And what's the impact of the facility budget then? Like what, I guess I don't have I suppose I could comb through this binder, but I don't have, you've been having this debate for some time. Where are we at in that debate, I guess is what I'm asking.
I think we agree with the council discussion that like the facility is the entire facility. And Director Logan pointed out like the 2 meetings ago, the sewer line on the courthouse. That's another example
Yeah.
of like something outside the facility that is likely to fail at some point.
Yeah, fair. Councillor Audie Kelly and then Councillor Ramna.
I might be getting too ahead of ourselves here, but it seems that it should be part of the facility and the operating expense of it, and therefore potentially part of leasing costs as well, right? Like if maintaining the lot and all that kind of thing, like it seems that it should be part of the facility condition. Like grounds too, like lawns and stuff.
Yeah, you're dancing a bit out of my area of expertise.
Mr. Bornowski?
I'd like to just make a little bit of clarification on the perspective we've been approaching in terms of fully leased facilities. And then I think Mr. Burt had some comments. So specifically, the courthouse is a really good example when compared to the senior center. Both are fully leased facilities with a tenant, right? CBRE or the province and the senior center. One is a community partner who delivers services to the community. And so we have a partnership with them and we've been involved with them and they've done a great job of securing grants to do improvements. And so we do maintenance here that we don't do elsewhere. When we exited the courthouse, we don't clear the snow, do anything. We have very specific responsibilities of what we will and won't touch on that facility. And so that's sort of the two ways we've approached it. But they don't provide services on behalf of the municipality to the community through a partnership in the way this senior center and the association does. And so should council want to see an increase in the support we provide for the association, for the services it provides, including partnering with them to try and find funding to get the parking lot paved in the same way the Historical Society found grants to improve elements of the facility they occupy and operate out of, or the way the Arts Council did for the Arts Station. That's certainly direction we can take and look at. Or if council just wants to look at a targeted spend and say, get this done, that's also an option council could spend. But we have really good relationships with our partners in fully leased facilities, and they typically take an interest and have a willingness to work with us on finding available funding to offset the direct cost to taxpayers.
I wonder if we can get engaged in that conversation then for this facility specifically. I do worry about this parking lot, and I know the operators do in terms of people getting in and out of their vehicles. Councillor Ramirez?
Thanks, Your Worship. Is this debate partly to do with how the mechanics of reserves work between streets and facilities and all those things? It's just moving money from one to another? Is that, or is there more to this than just that mechanics?
While council has been talking, Ms. Jansen helped us look into the 2017 AMIP, and I will get to your question, Councillor Ramirez, in a roundabout way. But at that time, the road surfaces for facilities was included in the transportation reserve, but since then we've changed our reserve bylaw altogether and combined reserves and found out that the numbers in that report are really low. So, I think while we're, in this process of gathering new information and adjusting our contributions to reserves and planning out over 20 years, it was, more just a theoretical discussion with council. And ultimately it will just determine how much money we put into which reserve for sure. Yeah. But council can always vote to move money between reserves if we need to borrow from individual reserves.
Mr. Bornowski?
If I can share one more comment. Where we are in the financial process doesn't mean that you have to lock in all of your capital projects.
Yeah.
So taking direction by resolution to advance an initiative could bring back a cost estimate and a recommendation to fund it from any number of reserves. And there are more than one. There is a land reserve that can only be used for the procurement or enhancements of land and other capital assets. There's facility reserves, there's a number of potential sources. And so we don't need to nail down that answer today or even nail down the cost and what to budget. I just want to be clear. If it becomes a priority, it may be something that you want to direct action and then bring something more confident back.
Thank you. Further, did you have?
Dear Worship, just like I just want to make it a little more practical. Let's say in the future we are going to go upgrade Max Church, let's say. Like in the current scenario now, you'll just go and improve the envelope and forget about the parking lot? Like, is that how it will work or?
No, I don't think so. I don't think we'd approach just improving one aspect of the facility. We generally look at the whole function of a property. And I think specifically the assessments and work underway will help answer those questions in better detail. What do we need to do? What's working and isn't working? Yeah.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. I was actually just going to ask about how we handle facility maintenance with regards to landscaping, much like what Councillor Adi Kelly asked, and it's been answered.
Thank you. And Councillor McIsaac, did you have your hand up?
I did, Your Worship, but I
Okay.
was going to weigh into the philosophical side, and since we don't need to resolve that tonight, I'll.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Councillor Adi Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. I was two kind of things, totally separate. I do, yeah, I see what you're saying about partnerships, and the partners have been fantastic. I would wonder if like you can get grants to fix a parking lot, but maybe you can. If we were to say, like, I know we talked about this before, and I'm really sorry that if I misunderstood, but if we sold a piece of land because we wanted to like fix other land, is that allowable?
Through to council, yes. Your land sale reserve can be used to purchase land or improve land and or other capital assets, provided the land you're selling isn't parkland, which has to go into a parkland reserve and can only be used for purchasing parkland.
Mr. Logan.
Just to provide a little bit of clarity on my budgets as far as the facility goes. So I don't, for each facility, I don't have a budget for maintaining the exterior at a lot of them. And in the case of Max Turkey, use that as an example. So in the past, we have addressed some pretty nasty potholes there. And then I would essentially look at my budget and be like, oh, do I have $5,000 to ask the street crew to come in with the paver and do a bit of a patch repair, or with the contractor that's in town? And so smaller type projects, I'll look at what I have for my building budget, and I'll essentially use some of that money towards the parking lot without having a specific like parking lot budget. In the case of the senior center outside here, it's more than a few $1,000s to fix that crater. So it becomes almost a capital project at that point, which I'm not traditionally budgeting for facilities. And that's why we're having this discussion about, is the paving patching budget meant for facilities? Could it be used for facilities? And is there enough there if that's what we're using it for?
Director Jansen.
Thanks. If I may, just to add to what Director Heisler and Director Logan are speaking to, after we do the assessments of all of our facilities, the goal is to create an asset management plan for each facility. That includes the capital renewal component. It includes operating strategies such as preventative maintenance programs. It's looking at all of the assets related to that facility and showing that timeline and how we're operating and what growth looks like and how we're planning for the future. So it will look at all of those elements. That's sort of the forward-looking way that we're.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Seeing none, Mr. Burdett.
Thank you. And so my plan with respect to that item and this next item is for the 25th, I'll have, a few different versions of bylaws ready to go, depending on which way council's leaning at that time, just so you know.
Thank you. Mr. Barnowski.
To follow up on Councillor Ramadas's request earlier about training, there are three thresholds for union members in CUPE. It's different for the International Association of Firefighters, and they do most of their training in-house. But with our CUPE staff, in addition, so excluding any safety training, or if you're an operator and you need operator training, this is beyond that. Regular union members can receive up to $500 in training and travel amounts per year. Union members who have mandatory CEUs as part of their certifications can receive up to 1,000, and so can union supervisors.
Thank you.
And so item number 2, and for clarity, this also is not in the proposed budget. So this would be an additional approximately 20,000 in expense. And as we discussed at the January 30th operating budget meeting, staffing is based on existing service levels, existing staffing levels. Departments did have the opportunity to do business cases for new staff. The leadership team reviewed these business cases and are advancing only one for council's consideration, which is the reintroduction of a GIS co-op student, which again is about 20,000. The city historically did employ a GIS co-op student before COVID, which was paused during COVID, resulting in a backlog of routine GIS data. This backlog affects the reliability of data that's available to our internal users like planning and engineering. And that's really all I have to say. Ms. Jansen is here to answer questions if needed.
Yeah, one that occurs to me immediately, and we've got a lot in play, both on the GIS and with Cloud Permit and the ability for those systems to speak to each other. So this strikes me with all that in play, Director Jansen, this feels critical in terms of helping to advance those projects. Is that fair? And I guess in the alternative, what's lost if we don't proceed?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. As Director Burdett mentioned, we used to have the student program, and historically, I oversaw that position for about 7 years, and out of those 7 years, we had a student for 5 of those years, 10 months of the year. It was an instrumental role in advancing technology in our organization and innovation. Also an excellent opportunity, obviously, to mentor young students at the beginning of their career. Our current GIS technologist is actually one of our former students from 2015, and they worked for the city of Edmonton for several years and came back here. And anyhow, it is a critical role. There is a significant GIS backlog. That's not just because the GIS student wasn't here. There's also been significant vacancies in the 2 technical roles that we have in our organization, the technologist on the GIS side and then on the engineering side. Right now, we've had some stability in GIS for 2 years. Prior to that, it was rotating for many, and the engineering technologist has been vacant and rotating for about 5 years or 4. So we are light on technology roles. There's only really 2. And as we advance through several critical projects, like our need is only going to grow in supporting our many systems and the information that drives our business decision making.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton?
Thank you. I think I support you, and I certainly support this role. If we're talking about a $20,000 budget line item on projects that are millions of dollars, this kind of becomes almost a rounding error in a lot of cases. And I am worried, and maybe staff can provide a little clarity on, to kind of dive a little further in your question, like what are the risks that we're exposing the organization and the community to by not having this data? Like, whether or not they're life safety critical risks, I don't expect it to be that, but what are the risks to securing future grants for major infrastructure projects, or loss of development opportunities when some big developer comes into town wanting to develop, but we don't have what I'm assuming is relatively basic data and potentially even more advanced data. Can you just kind of expand a little bit on that side of this?
Sure, I'll try. I think there's multiple questions in there. In terms of the risk, like in the GIS database, like where we're managing all of that information, we're looking at, we manage the city's land base. So everything to do with properties, roads, registered titled land, parkland, et cetera, and all the regulatory pieces that sit on top of that. So the zoning bylaw that we adopt, all of the development permit areas and everything related to the OCP. So there's all of that information. Plus then there is all the information about our assets. And in many cases, those assets are in the GIS, in particular on the utility side. That is the authoritative source for the data. And then we use that to leverage several utility models and otherwise over with our engineering consultants for our storm, water, and sewer models, as well as roads, which inform our integrated infrastructure capital plans that are pumping out long-term decision-making frameworks. So having we're pretty good maintaining that land-based component, regulatory stuff. We're working on building new tools to allow additional planning, like less technical staff, to be able to be stewards of some of that basic stuff. However, on the engineering side, we're quite out of date, especially with the rotating vacancies over in engineering. And we've finally filled that role. And looking as we modernize our GIS and go live on that system, be working more closely with that particular individual. I would say in terms of critical life safety, we've got a pretty good handle on those elements, but it's the operational issues. It's like the delay in getting infrastructure into the system, being able to respond to inquiries in the field by our operators, maintenance inspection, the delays in getting information into those programs. Never mind on the facility side, there's a significant gap there. So I guess in terms of risk, we're not moving forward with that. There was a time where we were in a really good position because we had the same consistent staffing for many, many years and had that student role sticking with us 10 months of the year. And so we were in a good place, and we've lost that, and we're kind of building back a foundation. And the student role is really our first attempt at getting some additional resourcing. In October, Council adopted guidelines that included no new staffing levels. So certainly there is a need for additional technology staffing. However, we're looking at maintaining existing staffing levels and bringing back this little component as a first step.
And for our GIS program, at some point, there's a hope that they will have a public facing component.
That's correct. Likely within the next 8 months.
Oh, excellent. That's good news. And this, of course, will support that. Thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. Director Jansen, I just want to make sure I didn't misunderstand. So we had problems with rotating vacancies, but right now we don't have those vacancies, or we still have those vacancies? I was a little confused.
Thank you, Councillor Adia Kelly. Right now, both of our technical roles are filled.
Excellent. Further? No. Thank you, Director.
Okay, so items 3 and 4. Number 4 was the property insurance, which I already talked about earlier, but I just wanted to have it here again. Again, the only option was to extend with our current provider. Number 3 was a discussion around the user fee bylaw. This bylaw recently saw improvements in late 2023. This year's proposed work plan has not included a review of this bylaw. The bylaw does already have built-in CPI rate increases for rental fees. A review could include investigating a local, non-local per visit rate. We did quickly grab some data from other municipalities, but we're only able to find one concrete example of a municipality having a non-local rate. Admittance rates, like daily drop-in rates, do not change annually with CPI, as these changes, the idea was to keep them as round as possible for easy payment and easy change. But for reference, a very rough estimate of our ActiveNet accounts, and ActiveNet is the facility booking software that we use. The non-local ActiveNet net accounts is 4,100 and local active net accounts is 8,100. So it's about 33% of our active net accounts is non-local, but you know, you could be here for a ski season and move home and your account would remain active for a bit. So that might be a little high in the non-local ones. There is also a report tentatively scheduled for council in the March committee on our advertising and sponsorship policy, which will potentially impact some items and users of this bylaw.
Councillor Ramanathan?
Thanks, Your Worship. While benchmarking with other communities is good, I think the sentiment, I don't know who said this, one of my colleagues said this in the previous meeting, what we wanted to see was go back to pre-COVID regime that we had. If I remember it right, pre-pandemic, we had different rates for locals versus non-locals, right? So what will it take us to go back to business as usual from before? Or am I mistaken?
It's quite a bit longer ago.
Okay.
One meeting, I didn't have my manager here to answer these questions. So the bylaw is actually set up so that in the changes, significant changes in 2020, I believe, when past director Proctor brought the significant changes and brought us up to a level where we're probably comparable a little more with other municipalities, bridged a pretty significant gap. At that time, there was a local and non-local rate applied to the bylaw. However, it's only specific to special events infrastructure and like ice bookings and things like that. So it doesn't, we don't actually have a local, non-local rate for like drop-in swimming or drop-in skating or shinny or any of our recreation programming. So that is still within the bylaw. It's still a non-local rate. There's still a local rate. There's a, you know, there's a further discount for like sports groups or adult and minor sports. So it is still set up that way with significant discounts for all those groups. But what we dug into with other municipalities is seeing who did a local, non-local rate specific to like, say, a public swim. And we found one example where the citizen rate would be, say, $6 and then the visitor rate was double that. So it's a very small piece of sort of our revenue for our facilities that we have drop-in rates for. So it's actually not a bunch of money if we were to do that, because we would still have those non-local, local rates existing that go up with CPI every year. That provides any clarity.
Councillor McIsaac?
Thank you, Worship. I can say that I recall we did used to have a separate swim rate for people that lived in Fernie and people that didn't live in Fernie. Like when I was doing Master Swim years ago, there definitely was different rates for that. And I do recall that there's quite a bit of discussion at the council table about, you know, is this this is another situation where we have a whole bunch of people who are using facilities and are they contributing, you know, they're not contributing tax dollars, and how is that all going to work out? As I recall, and this is quite a long time ago, there was a lot of discussion at that time was about how is, for example, the regional district contributing to the funding of our facilities, whether it's the library or arena, things like that. And then are we setting up for like a double dipping situation now if we're billing someone in the regional district and then collecting taxation from the regional district to support those facilities? And so it was a bit convoluted at the time, as I recall the discussion. I will say this, it was a very long time ago, so I don't remember the details of it, but we did at one time actually charge people a different rate to go swimming or whatever if they didn't live in town.
Yeah. I remember that myself. But I wanted to ask Mr. Burdett, like, can you speak to that, or that take a bit of research in terms of the contribution from the regional district, if any? I know there's contribution to the library operating, but is there contribution to any of our other facilities? No.
No.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Logan, how does Active Network, because it sort of shows us a rough 34% non-locals, like, is that a tool? And I'm only asking the question, I'm not suggesting, is that a tool that would allow us to differentiate and issue blue swipe cards to non-residents and yellow swipe cards to residents, that sort of thing?
So when I went to my team and I said, hey, how can we get any numbers to bring back to council to give them somewhat of an idea of the ratio. They provided some numbers, but with a note of like, hey, we don't know how accurate these are. The example of seasonal visitors that would open up an active account for the winter and then leave, like those still could be active from, who knows, 3 years ago. It would take a little bit more work. We'd have to put something in place, and we could do this at the front counter. And we could just ask people, are you local, non-local, when they come in and pay. We could start building that data up. ActiveNet itself, if you ask my staff how it's working for us, they would say it's very cumbersome and probably doesn't do the things that we wish it could do. We have explored the idea of different softwares, but of course there's a number of different softwares that a small team is implementing, and it's not at the top of the priority list. There is different pieces and components you can add on to that ActiveNet account with swipe cards and, chip readers and all these different things that we definitely could implement that would make it easier to navigate that non-local local rate. But we haven't actually looked into it to what it would take or whether our current ActiveNet programming would help us with that.
Okay, would support it even.
Yeah, it might involve buying a little bit more technology of scanners and that type of thing. But even to get another POS machine at the arena is a significant cost, and probably wouldn't be beneficial for the amount of money that we would get at the arena for those drop-in programs. Barely pay for it.
Councilor Rabidas?
Thanks, Your Worship. I just want to explore your yellow card versus blue card idea. I feel like we are overcomplicating this, right? The onus is on the person who is visiting the facility. Just ask if you're a Fernie visitor or a Fernie resident. They say yay or nay. And then if they are not, just show their ID card.
Yeah.
I think we are overcomplicating this. Again, I appreciate that it may not be a lot of money, but the implementation is nearly cost-free in my mind, because you put the onus back on the visitor and not on yourself. It's the visitor who needs to prove where they are from.
Yeah, and that's why I sort of asked that about, ActiveNet. When people come in but I guess we're currently not asking folks, do you live in Fernie, when they come drop in, right? Is there a record when an individual just drops in? Do they just pay and go, or do you gather some information to understand who they are and where they're from, and we'd like to add you to our system kind of membership kind of thing?
Yeah, as far as setting up an ActiveNet account where you can, load up your punch pass or whatever, I believe we're tracking some information there. But as far as, someone coming off the ski hill and paying cash, there's no way to really determine whether they're local, non-local. We think that most locals would have an ActiveNet account at this point, but it would take a little bit of effort to sort of make those account registries and understand where people are from. There is one example that we did find, and it's actually in Banff, where there is a very local card, and it is heavily subsidized. So all visitors pay a premium, and then locals get a significant discount. But it's also compensated by what's the word? It's not coming to me. I can't think of it. By the POW Foundation. Yeah.
By the what, sorry?
It's actually called the POW card.
Okay.
It's a foundation that subsidizes that cost for citizens. So the actual city of Banff isn't compensating that discount.
Oh.
It's a foundation that makes up the difference.
Interesting. Councillor Shoesmith.
Thanks, Mayor Milligan. Yeah, there's a lot there. I think it's telling that the other town that does this is Banff, which has a similar issue to us, but on steroids. I would imagine that, say, guesstimating that a third of people are non-local, should the price go from $6 to $12 for them and remain the same for locals, I mean, that's a third increase in our money intake there that could go to maintenance and starting to fill the holes for us, right? I also seem to recall, I was around when we had the locals passes, it was about a minute and a half to get one and pretty simple, like it was just a little blue punch card.
Councillor Ramanus?
Just did a quick math here, Councillor Shoesmith. CFO will do a better math than I do, but just my estimation is around 70 grand that you can get from your idea there.
7-0?
Yeah.
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 I'd
Council-
like to
or,
segue
Director.
on that because I do have a spreadsheet that I want to bring up for council. It's extremely bare bones, so I'm actually a little embarrassed, but I'll get over it.
Don't be.
It was a bit challenging to put this together because for one, the user fee bylaw itself has a lot of different rates and then pulling the data from ActiveNet took about a good half a day just to get our drop-in rates for pool and arena users. But so that's what this spreadsheet will show is our 2024 data. How's that look? Oh boy.
It is pretty rudimentary. No.
So we've got everything from lock rental to locker rental, to all the different admission rates. Single admission adult, not surprising, probably the highest earner. And this accounts for, in 2024, it was 137K, which is about 23% of our arena and pool revenue budget. So, if you applied a flat 20% to this, then that's another, whatever, 27.8K. Yeah. Or, if you, for example, charge single admission adults, if we assume 33% of these are out of towners and you maybe double the rate to $12 instead of $6, then that, that's about an extra 18,000 that you could bring in that way, just on that one ticket alone. So, it is a very basic data, but it at least provides a bit of context into who's buying what at our two facilities here.
Well, and these rates, sorry, Mr. Bird, these rates will go up for 2025 by CPI?
No, these rates will not because these are the ones we keep intentionally rounded.
Okay.
So like 309 plus GST probably equals 325, right?
Right.
Next round number. So, as I said, this took half a day and then it became clear that revisiting this whole bylaw is actually quite a big project. And I don't know how successful it will be as part of this budget process. I think the best idea that we came up with is maybe trialing out of town card for a few months and see how that goes. But it's really hard to estimate that in terms of like reducing our tax rate this budget process. You wouldn't want to overestimate and not have enough money all of a sudden.
Yeah. Councillor Ramanus?
Yeah, Your Worship, I don't think we should spend too much time working on something complicated that is going to yield at most 70 grand and probably much lesser than that, as CFO mentioned. But my specific question here is, of course, you can't trial anything without a bylaw, correct? Like okay. Can you explain a little bit more?
Oh, sorry, I was nodding to say you're correct. You would have to amend the bylaw, give it readings and.
Of course, yeah.
Okay. Councillor Shoesmith and then Councillor Nixon.
I was more or less going to say the same thing as Councillor Ramadas, just less clearly.
Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Worship. I would like to see, collect postal codes for 6 months, right? And then go from there and have it so that we have the data, right? Postal codes for 6 months. One of the other things that was kind of disconcerting from the last meeting, or maybe it was meeting 4.2 or something like that. I don't know. I mean, sorry, that was mean. I was disconcerted by the comment that Fernie families are being displaced in swim lessons from Calgary families or out of town families. And I was thinking about that quite a bit. And I think, how do we put that into our into our bylaw? and I mean, for me, it would just be like, no, you can't do that. But I mean, there has to be a bylaw for it, right? So I would like to see that sort of adjusted as well. It's, I don't like, well, that's what was said in that meeting.
But I think it also circles back to your opening comment about tracking postal codes for 6 months. We'd then have the data and not necessarily relying on anecdotal reports. Mr. Bornowski.
Thank you, Council. I want to just express that I might be on a slightly different page than two of the directors in that I think the 33% data is wildly inaccurate, because when we say active net accounts, that just means the accounts in ActiveNet that have been used in the past some odd years. This may be wildly inaccurate. That's not like a sliced version, to my knowledge, of someone who's come in the last 6 months and registered for a thing, and it has no relation to drop-in because we collect no data for drop-in. So I just want to flag that data collection is needed if we want to make an educated decision. And B, I think a council resolution directing staff to develop a policy-based approach to prioritize local registration before visitors for lessons means that we can develop an administrative policy that says we will open registrations and limit the first 75% of all classes to local residents before opening it to, like, we could do that at a policy level, not a bylaw level, because it's not a fee we're charging.
Councillor Adi Kelly, did you have a question?
Sorry, Your Worship, I was agreeing with Councillor Nixon.
Okay.
That I felt the same way. It was kind of disconcerting that our Fernie families might be missing out.
Councillor McIsaac and then Councillor Ramadas.
Thank you, Worship. I feel that the reason we're having trouble circling in on any kind of solution for anything in here is specifically because we don't have any data.
Yeah.
And so I think before we start wandering down the path of potential policies and raises and all that stuff, there's a simple solution, that is have our staff at the arena or pool or wherever people are doing drop-in, put a little tick list down, ask people when they come in where they're from, and then collect 3 months or 4 months of data and let us know. Then when we start asking questions, we're not doing it in the dark.
Yeah.
And then we can start having the policy discussion with a little bit of real data.
Yeah,
That's what I would propose.
it does feel like we're potentially reacting to anecdotal evidence. Councillor Ramadas and then Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, my preference would be to keep it as simple as possible, Your Worship. Don't have to take too much of the staff time. And I feel like a third of the users is probably your upper bound. Like, it's not going to be greater than that. But it's the question of equity that we need to address here. And that is why I want to kind of proceed with some kind of a work here, just to address what Councillor Nixon just pointed out.
Yeah.
But then again, just keep it as simple as possible, and let's not overanalyze.
Understood. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. Not so much a question, just a comment around this data collection, and an idea that occurred to me is if we're starting to ask drop-in users and users to our rec facilities for personal data. My comment is kind of going off on a tangent now, but A, do we have a policy for collecting personally identifiable data? Not that just asking for a postal code necessarily would be that, but the original intent of my comment was that would be a fantastic opportunity to start building an email list for future communications and really targeting people who will want to receive information from the city likely.
Mr. Bornowski?
Ms. Mackle, we can weigh in if she so likes. There's really hefty legislation in BC. We can't collect data for any reason that we don't need it for. We can't collect data and then link it to other data. We can't collect data and then use it for a purpose that isn't the express specific purpose for which it was connected. So if we collect a whole bunch of people's email addresses and we don't say to follow up with you with our newsletter and for registration and for we're sunk, it's cumbersome, but it protects privacy really well. I think we just have to do a good privacy impact assessment and identify what the hurdles are so that we can do a count and make sure that we're not creating data sets that can identify individuals. I think it's as simple as a colored dot in one column for locals and a colored dot in another column for visitors, and just collecting counts rather than personally identifiable
Yeah,
information.
yeah.
When we make it really simple, right? There are ways, but we'll have to do a PIA, which is a formal process.
Thank you. Further on this? Mr. Burdett.
Thank you, council. So item
I-
four.
Sorry, I
Oh.
did want to say, I really appreciated that discussion around the table. I thought that was, that was healthy. Yeah, yeah. The juice isn't worth the squeeze, as they say.
Item five was some ideas for some service reductions. So downtown and facility hanging baskets and flower beds are managed through a service contract, which expires at the end of this year, 2025. It's worth about 52,000. 10,000 of this, which would be for the baskets themselves, can be funded through RMI Tourism Infrastructure Fund, which is the 60% bucket of RMI. Yeah, 70. Which staff is recommending and will be adjusting the operating budget by this 10K. Unfortunately, this was confirmed with the province after V2 of the binder was printed, so it didn't make it in this version. The other 42,000 of beautification, and also the next line, the 14.5K of dike grooming has historically been done using operating budgets, and staff believes it could potentially form part of RMI. However, at this time, we're not recommending this because this amount would have to be funded through the 30% portion of RMI, which is for events, animation, and infrastructure. And there's been no consultation with the tourism sector on the use of that particular bucket as of yet. And the reason for that, mainly because is that, as a reminder to council, the confirmation of renewed RMI program has yet to be announced by the province. And so when that happens, future report to council will outline the project plan for the new RDS for council's endorsement. RDS is the resort development strategy, alongside what's already been committed to by council, like Grizz Days and Light Up the Night. The next line item there is pool shutdowns.
Sorry, Mr. Burdett,
Sure.
on those RMI numbers, just so I understand. You alluded to some specific buckets there, like 60%, 30%. So the 10,000, it is being recommended that will come out of the RMI funding from one bucket. The 42,000 not being recommended at this time, coming through events and animation.
That's right. Not at
Okay.
this time because, the annual funding is roughly 500,000.
Yeah.
We're allowed to spend 20,000 on administration, and then there's 30% on advanced animation, so about 150. We've already, there was already the commitment to Grizz Days for 40,000, and then Light Up the Night for, I think it was 10. And so, you're already down to 100, and council has directed staff to consult with the tourism sector on the development of the new RDS. So if you then commit another 42, and then there's already a grooming collaborative that's in the works, then you're quickly running out of that bucket.
Yeah, sorry to make you repeat all that. I just wanted to make sure I understood it. And it feels to me that presupposing this is the best use of this limits what it could be used for, which, could really add to the events and animation life of the community, as it were. Okay, thank you. Councilor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. That was a great, that was a great insightful question there. My ask here is like, what do we have to do to go further and have that conversation with tourism? Like, I know it's not a budget question, but is there a plan to make that happen? And by when?
That's a great question, Councilor Ramirez. And Director Logan is already hard at work at this, but this particular item is fairly new and there hasn't been a chance to discuss. And then it really depends on the timing of the announcement from the province, which we don't expect not to happen. We just kind of waiting for them before we can officially start to develop an RDS. So in terms of a timeline, it kind of depends, but I would expect it to be sometime this year, the announcement for sure. Yeah.
sometime this year.
Hmm.
Thank you.
This fits in line with the comments about like a flash sale and a high pressure. Council may remember, I think the last resort development strategy, we were initially given 8 weeks to undertake a 3-year resort development strategy, including consultation with the sector, the community, and Indigenous communities. And it didn't happen for any of the resort municipalities in the province, right? It's impossible.
Mhm.
That was announced in April. And so the province is coming in on their year-end budget process. I assume we'll get the announcement and they'll say, we'd really like this by the end of June or something. That is my guess.
Mhm.
That's about as close as we'll get for another month or so, I would imagine there.
Thank you.
So the next item on the list is pool shutdown. The city used to have a past practice of shutting down the pool for 6 weeks specifically to save money on staffing. This was quite a long time ago, before Director Logan for sure. Staff's not recommending this because of relationship with key user groups and lost revenue by doing so.
Mhm.
Having said that, there is the potential that we're looking at a extended closure this year with tiling jobs pending approval of the city's capital plan, depending on contractor availability and such. So during that closure, there's an option to not schedule or lay off all but 3 of the permanent staff, which would have approximately $27,000 in savings. Staff also not recommending this for many reasons. There's a heavy administrative burden. Typically, these other staff that were scheduled would do things like painting, grouting, doing a deep clean. So that wouldn't get done. During shutdowns, we often do advanced training of our staff, which if people weren't working would have to be done at other times. And then there's a very high risk of losing staff by doing this, retention, which, as you know, it's hard to get staff to begin with.
Yeah. Councillor Audie Kelly?
Thanks, Your Worship. Just to clarify, when you say staff, we're talking about our lifeguards and our administrative staff?
Yeah, we would maintain the 3 full-time staff, so mostly the part-time and casual.
Okay, and then
lifeguards.
a little bit of a question about the 5-week shutdown. If we were to do this tiling replacement, saying we're good to go, would we consult with our major user group there for timing?
Thanks for the question through to council. Yes, we would. We would just want to make sure that the capital plan is moving forward. We wouldn't want to get any alarm bells ringing before we actually had a plan in place. A lot of the time for these specific projects, though, we're at the mercy of contractors, right? So we're going to be starting late in the game. We're going to put, a request for quotes for that job. And when we secure a contractor, they may or may not be able to work within our timeline. We've sort of etched out September being the ideal time and the least impact for our users and probably the best time for our maintenance staff. And the arena's not in full swing. However, it all depends on the contractor and their availability. So we try our best. And once we have the go ahead for that specific capital project in the aquatic center, we will most definitely be discussing with our key user groups for that facility.
Councillor McIsaac?
Thank you, Worship. I apologize for delving into the fine tuning of this, but I'm curious with regards to the tiling project and the challenges with contractors and the shutdowns and the user groups and all that stuff. What is the timeline of necessity for the tiling? And do we have the opportunity here, for example, to plan for next year as an example? Like, I don't know how necessary it is to do it right away. Do we have the opportunity to engage with a contractor saying, okay, well, we're actually going to do this in February of next year? That's the low time for the dolphin. And I don't know what the low time for the dolphins is, but
Just to be clear.
just to be clear, like if we approve it, do we have that ability to look further down the road to pick optimum times and that sort of thing?
Yes. If it was an approved project this year, we could look at scheduling it early 2026, which would give us enough time to tell the contractor when it's going to get done. More specific digging into why we need to do this last section of tile. The entire pool is grouted with sand grout, and we've been slowly getting rid of that sanded grout, which wears out over time and sort of makes it more susceptible for popping up tiles, which becomes a bigger job. And we've been replacing that sanded grout with epoxy grout, which lasts much longer. It's lower maintenance. It's harder to apply, which is why we need these contractors to do the work. And this specific last section of the tile grouting is halfway up the deep end. So it involves scaffolding. It's much more complicated. We do grouting with staff, as mentioned earlier, just to sort of keep up with the general maintenance with the sanded grout. But this is to address sort of the last piece of all the grouting in the pool to go to this epoxy with, and it is a complicated job requiring a contractor to do it.
Further, yeah.
And then I guess the other aspect of the time frame discussion, of course, is that going much like with our other projects, is a longer timeline for tendering able to yield better pricing and opportunity and stuff for contractors. And it's not always the same win in every field. I recognize that.
Yes, thanks for the question. We are sort of probing different people. We got quotes just to build that budget for proposing to council from someone who hasn't done our grouting in the past. So we're starting to have those conversations with who has the skill set to do this work, or, you know, has the ability to do it. So we think we're, instead of having one option, we potentially could have three, which is 2 more than we've ever had. So yeah, for the amount of money that it is, it's not really, you know, people aren't lining up to do the work. It's a very kind of specialized thing. And we've historically used the contractor that originally laid the tile down and has a sea can full of our tiles and that sort of thing. So
Thank you.
Councilor Ramirez?
Thanks, Your Worship. It's a CFO, maybe it's a little bit of a wonky question here. Like if you're like shutting down for 5 weeks, for example, you're not necessarily like dropping your cost by 10%, right? Like it's 5 weeks in a year, if it represents 10% of the time, does it really come down by 10%? Because there's a little bit of fixed component to that also, correct? Like you still have to keep the lights on. Is it
The
not?
heat on, yeah.
Thanks, Councilor Ramirez. You're right. And, you know, part of that reason is there's full-time staff there that we would not be scheduling. Yeah, and then lights, insurance, all of it. Yeah.
No, please.
Do you have a rough estimate of what your fixed versus variable cost is? I'm just asking because it's a big item, right? $1 million out of your expenses, so.
I don't have it off the top of my head, fixed versus variable, but this particular example, we're estimating savings of around 27,000 if we were to do it. For all of that, you know, part-time and casual staff. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, why don't we do that? Well, maybe we'll finish this slide and we'll take a break. Mr.
Sure.
Burton,
Yeah,
does that
I
make
have
sense?
2 more after this, and they should be a little less heavy than this one, if that helps. But yeah, I mean, obviously. Oh, I'm on the wrong screen here. Seasonal winter operators, which were only recently approved in the budget a couple of years ago, could be reduced, which nominally would save approximately $40,000 each, but it will result in snow removal service level impacts and also very likely increased overtime, offsetting those savings.
Well, we have seen how challenging it can be with full overtime banks, particularly toward year end. I hesitate to even think about that, what that would look like in a hard winter.
Yep. And then Director Logan touched on this last point already, but the software change from ActiveNet. Oh, I'm sorry. We were done with that topic?
Well, I was. Councilor Adia Kelly?
I actually, if it's okay, I just wanted to touch back to the staffing. Do we have, aside from our proposed GIS, do we have a significant number of vacancies right now. Like, are we looking to fill vacancies? Are there vacancies that we could prioritize over others and defer some, or how are we for like staffing levels in general?
Staffing in the utilities, which is non-taxation, has been a bit of a challenge. We've had some turnover as people move and move on. We have pretty solid inside worker staffing levels presently. We have a managerial vacancy that we're looking to post and fill quite promptly. We are not looking to leave positions vacant for any lengths of time. As I alluded to in the beginning, we sort of have a pretty tight budget at the moment, and we're running with staffing that can continue to get things done at a service level. So we don't really have surplus employees or surplus positions that we're really questioning whether they're of value or of need or not. But I'll ask Ms. Neal if, from an HR perspective, she wants to add anything additional.
Good evening. Yeah, I would echo what CAO Baronowski has said, and we do endeavor to run quite tight recruitment timelines when there are positions that are available.
Councillor Ramadas, sorry.
No problem, Your Worship. Thanks. Is it possible to have a table, like every other slide here, also a table of how many vacancies there are, how many are being filled, what's the run rate to the end of the year, both on the union and the non-union side, like just for our understanding? Thanks.
Certainly, we can work one of those up. When you're asking, are you looking for a snapshot in time of presently, or are you looking for the number of position, like turnover numbers, recruitment campaigns for the past year?
Councillor Ramadas?
Past year, CAO, I'm just looking for 2025, like what's the projected headcount going to look like?
And just to confirm, we can provide that, and it's exactly the same as the projected headcount for 2024, unless the student GIS position is something that's identified to be advanced by council, but we'll provide that.
Right. Sorry, Your Worship, if you.
No, please.
Yeah. Just I'm saying to Councillor Odia Kelly's point here, like how many vacancies there are, active vacancies, how many have been filled. You know what I mean? Like it's just a full arithmetic of ins and outs and final number.
Headcount at a glance, sort of, yeah. Ms. Neal?
If I may, we typically have 79 like full-time permanent staff, and then up to 140. That includes casual, seasonal, and the auxiliary firefighters. Currently, we have lower auxiliary firefighter numbers. We are going through recruitment right now and are interviewing 6 more to add to the, I believe, 16. And right now, the vacancies that are open are for the seasonal temporary positions, such as the labor janitors that support the Parks and Rec Department, the recreation program leaders that run the day camps during the summer, and always recruiting casual lifeguards as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
And my last point on that, on the service reduction slide, was just around the ActiveNet software that Director Lennox already commented on, that may or may not help with user fee bylaw issues, but is way low on our list of softwares to implement, so not recommended at this time.
Understood. Yeah. I think and that conversation sort of indicated we need a whole bunch more data on that front anyway. So I think, given the software implementation we're going through now, probably wise to keep that below the line for now. Councillor Odia Kelly?
Thanks, Your Worship. And sorry, one more question, kind of diving back to the insurance piece, CFO. You made a comment saying hopefully there's maybe possibility of competitive bidding, but how long do we have to sign on to our insurance when we extend? Like, is it like a year? Is it we can cancel anytime we want, the kind of thing?
The minimum they would do late afternoon, January 31st, was 6 months. which if I didn't accept, the city would not have had insurance that weekend. So,
Mm.
yeah. So there's time at least to continue shopping around and for the other company to finish doing their work they were doing. They didn't deny us coverage. They just needed more time,
Mm.
which they were a little last minute in telling me. So, but that's okay.
Yeah, yeah, because they had indicated they could do it and then
Yes.
pulled the rug out at the 11th hour. Thank you.
And then I do have 2 more slides with a closing one, but you had mentioned you maybe wanted to break.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind a bio break for 5 minutes if that's okay. Thank you. Shall we reconvene, please? Identify the problem, student. Yeah. Well, you have to tell us about it. Welcome back, Councillor Ramadus. Are you going to rejoin us? No, not at all. Thank you, Mr. Burdett. Sorry, I'm going to do that thing that we've been doing all along. Can you go back to the previous slide? Do you mind? I just wanted to ask the seasonal winter operators. Now we make good use of them. Do we? Well, one, because we'd have to, or we would lose them. They wouldn't hang around for that. But Mr. Heisler.
Yeah, through to council. So we do make good use of them. I'll remind council, we attempted casuals, had trouble with retention, considered part-time. That didn't also pan out. Full-time guaranteed employment is what locked people in. And that's where we use them for like making sure we're hitting our service levels, and we're still relying heavily on voluntary overtime.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to just put that out there. I appreciate that. Mr. Burdett.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. This next slide shows or lists some of the bylaws identified for review to increase revenue. A lot of these have already had quite a bit of work done on them, gathering data from other municipalities, comparing that data to our rates, et cetera, but still require a pretty extensive amount of engagement work, especially with the users affected by these fees. If council gives direction to staff to prioritize these bylaws over other projects, there could be support made for this internally, but would delay other projects, especially in corporate admin and finance, like records and information management, the initial work on DCC and ACC bylaws. Having said that, these bylaws are all on our work plans, but are unlikely, even if rushed, to affect the 2025 budget much at all. A lot of these have a lot to do with Director Lennox, and he's prepared to answer any questions. But if that's all, I don't intend to go through this list one by one.
Councillor Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. So let's assume that they don't affect. Do we expect them to have a beneficial effect to our 2026 budget? Like I know it's hard to ask you for a number, but could you ballpark it?
Some of these are very dependent on council's philosophy. And I'll use business licensing fees as an example. A long time ago, the philosophy was a flat fee for all businesses in the city of Fernie. So whether you're a large hotel, Canadian Tire, a fast food chain, or an accountant with a home office, you pay the same amount for a business license. Some communities still do that. Other communities tie them to different types of values and costs that the enforcement or the support of those values drive for the municipality. And then there's a consultation phase. So it's impossible to ballpark without understanding where and having clear direction by a resolution or an adopted philosophy from council on what we're trying to pursue for some of these. With others, while dog license fees could go up, we do have very real needs for those fees, especially as we look to partner organizations like the Pet Society, who may need additional supports to continue their operations. So it's not fair to ballpark it without having gotten into the work with council and clarify.
And things like so two observations. Business licensing fee bylaw would take a considerable amount of consultation, I would think, with our business community, our Chamber of Commerce, get everybody on the same page in terms of a philosophy and a vision of fairness for the community. And things like the short-term rental fees bylaw, that's tied to business licenses, so that those have all been paid for 2025. So any change would only come into effect potentially in 2026.
That's correct.
Thank you. Councillor Shoesmith? Okay. Oh, Councillor Ramirez. Sorry. Mr. Burnett.
Thanks, Your Worship. Maybe it's my own lack of understanding here. What are comfort letters again?
Thanks, Councillor Ramirez. Ms. Neal might be able to provide a little more input, but, or Mr. Lennox, yeah, sorry.
Evening, council, through to Councilor Ramanus. Yeah, comfort letters are usually requested from lawyers to facilitate a real estate transaction. So they're submitted to the Corporate Services Department, and they do a review in conjunction with our building official. The building official reviews the building permit file and, confirms that there was a building permit issued, and, there's a certificate of occupancy issued, that type of thing.
Sorry, while you're there, Director Lennox, is that, and I think about the potential for layering in like a GIS system. Is that something that could eventually be further expedited by a fulsome GIS system? So you'd identify a parcel with improvements and all that data is right there versus having to go to take up the time of our building officials who are already incredibly busy.
Yeah, I don't think GIS would be that helpful in that. I think digitizing our building permit files would be.
Okay. Yeah.
That's the key there, because they have to physically go and find the files,
Yeah.
open them up and go through them, versus if they were all digitized and they could just, do a few key punches and find them on their computer. We are actually, through a casual employee, started to digitize particular development permit files. We've made some really good progress with that, and our planner too, for every permit that we get in, development permit we get in now, for I think a couple of years now, has been scanning them. So all the recent files are now scanned. So we are making some progress in that regard.
Excellent. Director Jansen, you sprang to your feet there. Did you have a comment?
I mean, Director Lennox did answer a lot of those things, but certainly as Ms. Neal will be rolling down our records management phase 1 this year, should it be approved in the budget, we'll start the process of records management, and technology will be a big lens into that. And right now our GIS internally does do direct links to files. So like it's not housing data in there for like property records or anything, but certainly anything that has been digitized is available to sort of connect to that staff level of integration.
Thank you. Councilor McIsaac.
Thank you, Worship. Just because I've been asked about this directly and will be again soon, and it does feel like one of those ones with smaller number of tie-ins. Do we know what's happening when we're going to get to the dog license thing, when that's going to get on the work plan? That doesn't have that many tie-ins to other departments, and I do know that there is some discussion with the Pet Society, but wondering how far away that might be.
Is that you, Director Lennox?
Yeah, through to council, March 18th, committee of the whole, the bylaw enforcement officer is going to bring a staff or request for a decision on a new concept to address dog licensing in the city that could provide a benefit with cost sharing opportunities for the Twin Meadows shelter and the Pet Society. So we're gearing up for the March committee of the whole. And I understand that there's going to be a delegation from the Pet Society at that particular meeting as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank
you're
you.
welcome.
Mr. Burdett?
Thank you, Council. And then finally, this slide has a couple of capital projects that could be delayed, but would not really affect the overall tax rate, just the amount of money coming out of reserves in 2025. There was some talk last or 2 meetings ago about citizen satisfaction survey, maybe changing the frequency of that. And there's some downsides listed here to doing that, and it's not recommended by staff. And then the holiday decorations could be pushed, but also, and I didn't put this on the slide, we intend to explore funding that with the RMI infrastructure bucket as well. We just haven't been able to confirm that one as of yet. And so, those are a couple of capital projects that have popped up the last couple of meetings for a little extra discussion, if there's any to be had at this time.
I think I may have shared this already, perhaps not, but when my wife and I were in this building for the craft fair at the Light Up the Night celebration, there was a couple here from Crooked Lake, Saskatchewan, which is a great name. But they'd done a Google search for the most festive city in British Columbia, and Fernie was, meaning sort of Christmas festive, and Fernie was somewhere near the top of their list, like second or third on that list. And so they came here as a result. So, or our Christmas decorations, I don't know. Councillor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. On the citizen satisfaction survey, CFO, again, it's not so much about the cost, right? Cost is $20,000. Whether it impacts tax rate or not is kind of less important for myself, at least. The only reason why I brought it up last meeting was more around how much time and effort it takes to just coordinate that activity, right? When staff could be doing something else more important. Like that's where I was going with that, knowing well that the statistical output won't be any different from where it was in 2023. Like that's where my head was going with this. Not so much on the tax, but how much effort it goes is in there, and so much coordination is required between yourself, Canada Post, all our partner agencies and consultants. And yeah, I just felt like it was a big exercise.
Thanks, Councillor Ramirez. Yeah, I totally understand your point. And I think at this point, it would be up to council what their philosophy on this particular item would be.
Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Your Worship. I feel I would be remiss if I didn't make the comment about this and Director Bird has been very forward about which things affect specifically the tax rate and so on. But a number of these things do affect the amount of money that comes out of reserves, which isn't directly affecting the tax rate yet. But it will in the future when we don't have the money in the reserve. So I feel like we should treat the spending in the same fashion with the same regard. And in this particular case, I agree with Councillor Ramirez. I think it's worth spending a little bit of time to determine what the optimum time frame is for surveying for the benefit of tracking the ongoing relationship with our citizens, while keeping an eye to the cost to our staff and the cost of money and how much that's deferring other things and so on. So I do think it's probably worth some discussion in the future about optimizing that time.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Sort of recognizing that in 2026, we'll have the ultimate community survey, which is an election. So yeah, I don't know if there is data out there in terms of what is the optimum window for doing and repeating a community citizen satisfaction survey. Manager Rhodes.
Yeah, so as part of our last RFP, we did ask for a recommendation from the consultant on best practice for the consistency. Part of that was tied to the fact that we had a gap in our data from not having conducted a citizen satisfaction survey since 2020. And prior to that, we did do them annually for a long period of time. Director Jansen could probably tell me exactly how long, but I would say for the previous 10 years, at least, we had been doing them on an annual basis. Looking at what other municipalities are doing, that seems to be very consistent. And in talking since we had this conversation last time. I've spoken with a number of consultants that do deliver this type of service, and they do still recommend you're doing something at least on that 2-year frequency. And then in terms of, you mentioned the 2026 timeline, most municipalities do try to avoid the election year to give you a little bit more of an accurate representation that's maybe less politicized. And so this, our sort of frequency or timeline that we're on now puts us at giving you that new data the year after someone is elected or a new council is elected, and then gives you a touch point or a check-in. And then, as Councillor Amadas did note, it may be that your data or your information is not shifting, but again, that does tell you something as well. And as I mentioned last time, this is very tied to the to council strat plan in terms of we have a lot of our indicators in there. We've noted a lot of data that's kind of missing as we start to track more. So that is tied to a lot of the measures in the strat plan.
Thank you, Ms. Rhodes. Councillor Ramirez.
While I agree with most of the things that manager is saying, Your Worship, it's just that if you're going to ask the consultant if we should do it again, they will obviously say yes. So it's like the fox minding the hen house. So I don't know, like I'm a little conflicted on this particular work.
Councillor Hamilton and then Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. A comment and then a question. When we embarked on this citizen satisfaction survey discussion 2 years ago, the discussion point was we did not have consistent data to actually determine if the needle was moving in one direction or another, which is why we agreed to do it and why we wanted to get into a regular habit of doing it. So I am hesitant to not approve this. I recognize the cost is certainly not meaningful. And to Councillor McCusk's point, it is good. It does have to be paid for at some point through taxation. But my question through this is something that the data can be extracted through the OCP or done in conjunction with the OCP surveys to help minimize the cost?
We did briefly have that discussion as we were reviewing the OCP submissions, and we had talked about moving it forward in the year so that there's a potential that it can inform that early sort of phase of the OCP. So some of that data would already be collected. Part of the benefit to keeping the frequency of the 2-year frequency is to be asking the same things and to be getting that consistent data. But that's certainly something we can explore further once that contract for the OCP is awarded and look at opportunities to do that.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. I think we need to be consistent about it in order to get good data. And if it turns out that all of the scores were still the same, that does tell us something as well, right? So I do like how Manager Rhodes explained where the timing falls from the political perspective as well. I think that's valuable. I don't think having it just before an election would be a good thing in terms of.
Might
Like-
tell you how it's going to go.
Well, would the data be more political than you know
for
what I
sure.
mean?
Yeah.
Rather than,
Yeah, understood. Councillor Shoesmith.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. Well, I'm pretty sure we're not going to see a huge change just because the town hasn't undergone huge changes, nor have the people. I do think that being consistent with this, it's really our only good, trustworthy source of guidance because, I mean, other than that, we've got talking to people in the streets, which is pretty good. And we've got Facebook, which tells us the world's on fire. So, I mean, we do need something to go by. So, yeah, absolutely. No, I think this should just be continued as was.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that as well. I am curious, maybe Manager Rhodes or maybe Director Jensen, if we did it for 10 years, consistently annually, if that's the time frame, what did we see in that data? And like, what were the questions similar, and did we see fluctuations? Like, do you have a sense of that?
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. It was about a 10-year period or even more than that we were doing it annually. It wasn't a statistically valid survey, and it certainly wasn't a well-designed survey. It did ask some basic questions about service areas, significant things around snow removal, and sidewalk experience and that kind of thing. But year over year, it wasn't always the same. It was difficult to compare year over year, and there wasn't a large uptake either. So data was fairly sparse in terms of reliability.
Thank you. Councilor Ravenous?
Just to be clear, Your Worship, I love the survey. The last one was terrific. I still read it. It's just the ongoing commitment to it is where I'm questioning, not the scientific basis or the quality of the data itself.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah.
Other questions, comments? Councilor Audie Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. On the list of changes to the version, so am I reading it right? The overall reduction in the shortfall is the 72.8 CFO?
Yep, that's right, which is mainly made up of those 3 items, which I highlighted green for good, red for bad on your sheet there.
I like that. It's like a Dr. Seuss.
Thank you. Mr. Burdick.
Thank you. This is my last slide. And just to be honest with council, I think I speak for all staff when we found this kind of a challenging and uncomfortable exercise, which is fine. It was a good exercise to go through, but for us, it really highlighted just how bare we actually are running our existing services, and which I think is highlighted by that number in the earlier slide when I said there's only a 2.8% increase on our 25 items alone outside of that COVID restart grant. So then to close, next Wednesday is our public open house here at Senior Center at 6:30. Senior staff and council will be present to talk with any members of the public, and we'll have lots of printed budget boards that have information on this year's budget. But, and then just lastly, I'd like to revisit the question on budget survey to see if there's any more insight into specific questions council would like asked. We are intending to open that survey up soon and keep it open through the budget open house tomorrow morning.
Hey, I saw you first. Councilor Audie Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm not sure how to phrase this budget question, or even if it's a good one, so feel free to shoot me down. I know we have a few things that we're working on that that might require like our wastewater, our fire hall. There's some things that we might have to look into borrowing, and I'm wondering if it would be valid to contemplate a question saying, I don't know how to phrase it. What impact does the tax rate have on people's willingness to invest more in the community? Like, I'm not phrasing it very well. Yeah, like would they be less likely to want to invest more in the community? Would they tied to the tax rate somehow?
Councilor McIsaac, you had a comment on that, or?
Yes. Thank you. Sorry, I forgot all about that.
No.
I was moving on to Councilor Audie Kelly's question. There were 2 variations on the budget survey that were sent out. So which one would be the ongoing one? Which one would actually be asked this time? The first one was, I can't remember which years they were, but the first one I looked at was kind of shorter. Didn't contain as many questions. It was a fairly direct question with regards to tax increase and investment zone. And then the next 2 had more protracted set. So I'm wondering which one are we on?
The shorter, more succinct one was the one from last year, which was shorter because in the previous 2 years, we'd included some questions that would have historically been in the citizen satisfaction survey. And that was partly early in your term here to give some of that insight that you felt that was missing. And then the one you're referring to was last year's. So the intent would be to follow that more closely and then have one or two questions that are more specific to the conversations that you've been having over the last 7 or 8 meetings.
So follow-up question.
Yeah, please.
Can you refresh our memory as to what the take-up was on the survey for the budget last year? Like, do we have a meaningful number of people who submitted the survey results?
Last year was very low uptake, like approximately 40 people who submitted that. In the 2 years previous, as I was pulling those, there was anywhere from 120 in 2022, I believe. And we did a 2-part, we did some initial feedback, like a survey and then a feedback form in 23, and had about 40 and 30 people for those 2 different components that happened at different points in the budget process.
Thank you.
And that does not take into account the people that came to the open house, which was also a fairly low attendance.
And then,
Sorry.
sorry,
Go
just to refresh my memory, did we actually hand people the survey at the open house?
We did not do a paper survey, but we had the link available, and
right.
then we captured feedback from people who came along the same lines as the survey questions.
And did we do something different, Manager Rhodes, in the one that, in terms of communication for the one that saw greater uptake versus last year? Was there a difference in their advertising or outreach or?
My recollection would be that there was more the context of what was happening at the time. And that one was the year we had a specific question about the Affordable Housing Reserve.
Okay.
And there were other things happening at that time. So that does tend to impact what the uptake is on a budget survey, for better or for worse.
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you. Councillor Avenis?
Thanks, Your Worship. CFO, this was an extensive deep dive. Like I'm just going through my notes. You covered pretty much everything that I was thinking about. The only thing I was surprised with was there was not much commentary on fire here. Is there anything we are missing?
Some of that, because it is employment related, was dealt with quite significantly yesterday evening during the in-camera meeting. I would be happy to follow up with you just directly after the meeting so that we can have a really useful conversation, because there was quite a bit dealt with there.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Burdett? Oh, sorry, Councillor Audie Kelly. Couldn't see you for the screen there.
Oh, sorry, Your
No.
Worship. CAO, this is probably, it might be either you or CFO. RCMP costs for communities. Community our size, can you just remind me of the funding, the difference for RCMP that say communities under 10,000 have to pay versus over 10,000?
Under 5,000.
5,000, because I was thinking that could have been a UBCM resolution. Because really communities under 10,000 having to pay for policing is significant difficulty.
Mr. Burdett?
Thanks, Councillor Audie Kelly. The first limit is under 5,000, and then the province just pays for the RCMP, the complement. And then as soon as you hit 5,000, you have to pay 70% of their costs. And how that works is every year, certain time, they'll send Mr. Baranowski and I an email with their proposed complement, which is for us is 6. And then they'll send us the costs and we pay 70% of that. And then the next threshold is 10,000 where you
90?
pay 90%.
Yeah.
So, eventually we'll probably get over 10.
Further?
15,000. Sorry,
It's a
15,000.
big jump from 0 to 70.
Yeah, it is.
It's a really big
Yeah.
jump.
Yeah, and I mean, that would have happened in Fernie fairly recently, and I don't really personally remember.
Yeah, please.
Well, it was yeah, I think it was 2017. And then Mayor Giuliano, I think she contested the size of the population. But they hadn't taken into account that West Fernie was joining
Mhm.
Fernie.
Mhm.
So,
Boundary expansion.
yeah, boundary expansion.
Thank you, Mr. Burdett. Anything more?
No, sir.
Thank you. Anything else from council? So, Councillor Nixon, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. So this 2023 budget survey, is this exactly what's going to go on, except the numbers are going to be adjusted for like 5.98% into the budget survey as well? That's going to be released tomorrow morning. Is that right?
Yes, you said 2023 and it'll be
Yeah,
the
so it'll be
2024 one.
24, yeah. So
Uh,
I only have the 23. I didn't see the 24.
Yeah, there were several, yeah.
And it'll be, but to answer your question, it'll be the 5.98 minus the 10,000 for that one RMI funded, the planters or the baskets.
Right.
And it seemed like we had pretty good consensus on the GIS co-op student, so I could add that 20 as well for now.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. If there's nothing else from council, yeah, to Councilor Ravidus's comment, really appreciate the deep dive and appreciate also that it was, it's an uncomfortable position to be in, to ask staff to kind of go through that exercise, but I also think it's a healthy exercise. To your point, like realizing, things aren't fat. So I think that's a valuable exercise to go through. So very much appreciate it. And yeah, with that, we will adjourn and thanks everybody for joining us this evening.